Welcome to another episode of Successfully Live. I'm Adam O'Donnell, the co-founder of Successfully. Today, I'm super excited to be here with Patrick Campbell, the CEO and co-founder of Price Intelligently. Thank you so much.
Yeah, pumped to be here.
Definitely, man. It's fun. So Patrick's had a cool career so far in his relatively short career working for the Department of Defense and Google. And then, of course, you've been doing this Price Intelligently for 6 years?
It's been a labor of love so far. And one little context to give is we also have a product called ProfitWell, which is subscription financial metrics. It plugs right into your billing system for free. Gives you your MRR, churn, all that kind of stuff by plugging into like Zora, Stripe, whatever you're using. And I'm giving you that context not to sell you. It's not a great sales pitch either way, but because we're not only sitting on all this pricing data, but we're sitting on just an exorbitant amount of just financial data for the software industry. And what we found in looking through all this data is that fundamentally as a company, we are focused way too much on acquisition-based growth. So what I mean by that is if we really look at our budgets, if we ask our C levels, if we ask our founders, like, hey, where are we going to put most of our resources? Where are we going to put most of our time and money? It really goes into acquisition. And the problem is that what we found is that in the data, that acquisition is actually one of the least effective growth areas, and retention is one of the best growth areas that you have there. And so as a company, that's kind of our fundamental problem, I would argue, from kind of like a customer success perspective. But from a deeper customer success standpoint, when we look at different customer success and retention products, I think the problem that we fundamentally see with a lot of folks in the industry is that too many of our products are make us do more work as the customer. You give me this product and you say, hey, we're going to solve all your customer success problems. You're going to have to configure this and hire 3 full-time people just to like get the value out of the product. And not enough of our products, and we do have a customer success product, it's a point solution, but not enough of our products are focused on, hey, I'm just going to solve this problem for you. You're just going to turn it on, and it's just going to automatically take care of this problem for you. So you can focus on the harder things like, hey, the customer churning because they don't like this feature, they didn't get the value proposition, and things like that. So yeah, just a little bit of a nice high level, like this is the problem in the industry. And then I would argue these are like, the main problems with what's going on in the customer success world.
A lot of the solutions that are offered in the customer success SaaS retention space they give you more work. They add work to what you're doing. So like having solutions like y'all's that take stuff off the table and keeps doing that is incredible. The problem that we found is that it can be really hard to do that work for customer success correctly. Because we all know that marketing automation, and AI and all this stuff, we're trying to get into that world, but it's just not perfect enough. And the customer doesn't, they call BS on it. They're like, this is a robot. I'm not as interested. And if you have Salesforce as your customer spending a couple $1 million a year, you're not putting that on there. So it's kind of this catch-22. Like, do we keep trying to automate, which is the only way that we're going to buy more solution, or do we just have to say there's some people that we just got to go custom on? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
To me, like that viewpoint, it's like the classic like catch-22 of a lot of different industries. Like we see that in the pricing space as well, which is, everything's a little bit similar, but it's a little bit different. So you have to do something custom. I think that it shows though that we haven't made hard decisions as an industry. Like, and I'll argue like, the entire software industry, but I also argue kind of like the vertical of like customer success, where if you can afford to raise hundreds of millions of dollars, as some folks in this space have done, you can try to buy the market and try to train the market, similar to the marketing automation space and what HubSpot and Marketo have done. I think the problem is that the adoption rates for customer success software has not been as high as something like marketing automation, because again, it's not tied to that most important thing that all of our executives think of, which is that acquisition-based growth, right? Like, how many times as a customer success person have you or anyone listening had to go to someone and be like, listen, I just need budget for this thing, and this thing's so important because sales keeps screwing this up, and the only way we can fix it is XYZ, right? And so I think it comes down to having to make some hard decisions from a product perspective. So for one, hey, if we're not going to get this mass adoption, and even if we can raise hundreds of millions of dollars, we're still not able to train the market, like what are the things that we can pick off of this customer success process or this roadmap in order to help, right? So for example, we have a product called Retain where it solves your delinquent churn problems. Delinquent churn, for those of you who don't know, it's anyone who's churning because of credit card failures. And we basically have so much data that we've built some machine learning models that allow us to basically be the best in the world at recovering delinquent credit cards. But the important part is that we don't do we don't let our customers do any work. Like they say yes, we set it up, and it's like a 15-minute setup, and then we do everything for them. They don't have to touch it. They don't have to log in. They don't have to do anything. It's called an anti-active usage product. There's companies like Advocately, which are fringe customer success as well, where they handle basically cultivating reviews, for you, right? And it's those types of things that yes, that we're not going to be able to get to the core customer success problem, but a lot of companies out there are still trying to like march against that drum when in reality they should be probably pivoting to some point solutions and then expanding into some of these more heavy active usage type products. And that I think is it's one person's opinion, if you will, but I think that when you start making those tough decisions, you either come up with more like targeted anti-active usage or like do it for you products, or you go kind of what you suggested, which is, you know what, we're going to have to spend, similar to what HubSpot did, some extensive training and extensive setup where we're going to just set this up for you. We're going to set up our product for you. We're going to do your training, and then we're going to have that implemented over time, which is one way to handle the sales forces of the world, if you will.
Pricing and customer success. Like, help me see how, what you've learned on that. You've gotten probably more data than anyone else in the world on that.
I alluded to this before, but the one thing that we focus on as companies is all about acquisition, right? We spend very, very little time on retention. We spend even less time on your monetization. And what's also fascinating is that when you look at the impact of each of these levers, acquisition, monetization, retention, it's quite literally the inverse of how much attention we spend on it. So the least effective channel or the least effective growth lever is acquisition. The most effective is monetization, and a close second is retention. And so when we look at this data from kind of like a monetization perspective and kind of how that injects with customer success, what we typically find is that the most successful companies out there are using things like value metrics. So a value metric is what you charge for. So it could be per user, per 100 seats, per data points, per whatever. But what that helps you do from like a customer success perspective as well as a monetization perspective is allows you to kind of bake in not only making more money and raising your ARPU from the growth of that particular customer within your product, but it also helps get you to very, very net positive revenue retention with your customers. Because what's happening is essentially, as that customer is using more and more of your product and using more of that value metric, all of a sudden you're seeing, more and more revenue or more and more, money from that particular customer, which helps both of those levers. And so to me, that's kind of where, these two practices of customer success and monetization really meet, from like both a retention and that monetization perspective. But I think what's also interesting is that when we look at pricing and when we think about pricing, our philosophy is it's very value based. It's called. So it's essentially understanding the value that your customer sees in your product, which is a very customer success style thing, if you will. And then once you understand that, that's how you create your actual pricing strategy. And so for us, when we do our pricing research, our software, it's completely based on essentially understanding exactly what that customer sees, what their willingness to pay is, et cetera, and then baking that into the pricing strategy. And the smartest companies we work with then take that data and basically use it in their customer success to understand, hey, as soon as so-and-so starts using this feature, their willingness to pay is supposed to go up. Therefore, we need to like work around getting them to use that feature, having them talk about that feature in particular.
That's incredible. So obviously the traditional approach on that is just per license usage, right? What are some other creative things that you've seen?
Per user pricing is actually the worst type of pricing. And the reason is because, and just to give you a little history lesson, per user pricing came from essentially old school folks were selling perpetual licenses, like actually selling like the disk, or even further back before the disk. And basically when the cloud came, they were all like, well, how do we sell this thing? Well, we always did per seat, let's just do per seat, right? And that's where basically everything is per seat, like, oh, we'll just sell it per seat, right? The problem is that your seat isn't where the value is. If you think of any marketing product, and I would argue any customer success product, you essentially know that you know basically that seat isn't the value. It's either the data that's coming in, it's the amount of growth, the amount of leads, the amount of enrichment of your leads, all those types of things. And so the good litmus is, if someone can log in with the same email address and get the exact same experience, then you shouldn't be doing per user. Now, if they can log in and it's completely different, like I log into a CRM, I see my leads versus someone else logging into the CRM and seeing their leads, then it's a good candidate for per user. But some other ones are, so with Retain, we actually charge based on the money that we recover. So if we don't recover any money, you don't pay anything. We recover a lot of money, you pay, a lot of money, but not as much as we recovered for you. Other one, and that's like the most beautiful value metric you can get to is money, right? If you can somehow perfectly align money to what's happening with that user, then you're golden, right? It's hard though, right? Because even HubSpot, when you think of like a marketing automation solution, they go with leads because it's a proxy for money, and because they're not directly tied to bringing you that more money your content or your creativity did. And so leads is another good one. And the litmus here typically is to find what's the thing closest to money and the value that you're creating. Take one step back, and then that's probably a good value metric. So per 100 visits, per lead, per video, per all sorts of things that you can think of to kind of help. But you should definitely think further from per user.
Just like you have 25% of SaaS companies giving you data on what they're charging, and those metrics, like just incredible gold. What are some other things that we should be thinking about just moving forward as a SaaS retention expansion industry?
Salespeople are ruining our jobs as customer success people. And I mean that maybe as aggressively as it actually sounds, maybe not, we'll see. But just to give you a perspective, we ran an analysis comparing the percent discount that was given on an initial annual contract compared to the willingness to pay at renewal. So basically, if I gave you 30% discount on our first annual contract, like I'm a brand new customer, you give me 30%, what is my willingness to pay for that second year, when it comes up for renewal? So it's a measure of, is there an effect of a discount on, on that willingness to pay or on that value of the product? And unfortunately, we found that like heavy discounts really diminish the value of the product from the customer perspective. So I don't have the data right in front of me. I can share it with you for the show notes, but I believe, and I'm pretty sure this is right, but most of us are doing heavy discounts in enterprise sales, or even mid-market sales. We're giving discounts of 30, 40, 50% on the first year contract just to get a customer through the door. And anything over, I believe it was like 25%, just sees a crater in willingness to pay, meaning basically those companies that are, or those customers who are receiving that big of a discount, they just don't value your product as much because they probably weren't the right customer to begin with, or the salesperson didn't do the job that they should have. And what's obviously scary about that is it's a ticking time bomb, right? Like the salesperson, they close the deal, so they're like, oh, I did so good, I'm awesome. And then all of a sudden it's like up for renewal, and the customer success person can't close the deal at where it's supposed to be, and he or she is getting blamed for it, even though it's really probably the salesperson's fault at that particular point. So that's one data point. I think some other interesting data points is that NPS scores overall have declined. And this is shocking to me because software is obviously so much more amazing than it was 5, 10 years ago, right? But today, what we're finding is that basically it's the old adage of everything's amazing and no one's happy. So what's happened is that software has gotten, and we have some data on this, where the average implementation time for a piece of software has gone from, I think, like the average of 56 hours like 10 years ago. And keep in mind, 10 years ago it was a lot of like enterprise software being sold, not as much, like touchless kind of software, down to I think it's about 6 hours now on average. And there's obviously a long tail there of products that basically you can just sign up for and get ready to go within minutes. But what's amazing is that the average NPS score has gone down from, I believe, about 34 across B2B and B2C about 10 years ago to now an average of about 10 in the past year. And we've created better products, like qualitatively and objectively, we can say that we've created better products because things are so amazing now based on infrastructure and all types of stuff that made it easier to build. But unfortunately, we live in a world where basically it's becoming harder and harder to make customers happy because they're just expecting more and more based on how successful software's been. So those are some good data points, I think, especially relative to what's going on in the customer success world.
That's huge, man. Let's first talk about discounting, because I mean, I just like if I'm a customer success person and I'm about to have the renewals coming up, and my excuse is, well, the salesperson discounted it by 25% 12 months ago. That's probably not going to go over too well, because it's like, well, how come they couldn't have seen the value through that time? Like, why couldn't you have? So I'm just. Could you give? Do you have any other thoughts on as to why that is? I mean, the data is the data.
So it really comes down to you're priming the customer incorrectly, right? So I don't necessarily have the data on this, but here's what I would bet. I would bet that those customers who were given a 50% discount to use the product have probably not fully implemented the product within that 12 months, no matter the amount of work that the customer success person tried to do. Their usage is probably not the same as the person who paid full price. And even in addition to that, like I know certain products out there who their sales teams give heavy discounts, and they have not, like, people have not implemented even though they bought for that year. Like, it's just something that we've seen in the market. And so what that happens is like, it's not, yes, the customer success person should be able to defend against that at some level. But if I give you, the worst customers to deal with, and it's hard for me to like blame you a year in when it's all of a sudden it's like, they started from the wrong premise essentially. So it's a little wishy-washy, of course. There's blame all around, of course, but it's one of those things where there's not to use like a biblical term, but like the original sin was with, the sales team, and, the customer success person is essentially paying for it.
I, it makes a lot of sense, and it's almost like half those deals should not have closed.
Yeah,
It,
totally. And they were closed because, oh my gosh, we have to close the quarter. We have to, do this, and this. And they weren't the best deals. And that's where, like, whenever you see I like to look at a company's how aggressive is their quarterly like sales quota, meaning like their quota is a straight line, like how aggressively is that curve towards the end of getting there? Because if it's a very, very, pregnant curve, meaning it's like nothing really in the beginning of the quarter, and then all of a sudden at the end of the quarter, we do everything we can to hit our number. I would argue, and I don't have the data to support this quite yet, just because we don't have it, but I would argue that probably that those relationships correlate, or that type of scenario correlates probably with really bad types of customers. Whereas the customers where it's a straight quota line and there's a little bit of a curve, because there always is, because everyone works a little bit harder at the end of the quarter, those are probably like healthier businesses, if you will.
do you want to name that? Can we just put a title out for the industry?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a good theory.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's funny because we've been very fortunate to be not in the middle, but like there's people in Profitwell who they're like, oh, we want to sell our company, or we're trying to raise money, and so they want us to introduce people, and we've been introducing them, and then some folks have asked us like to kind of be an advisor on a deal, if you will, very informally. But then we're thinking like how we evaluate it, and there have been a couple of deals where we've been like, yeah, I don't know if you've seen this, but this is what their growth curves look like. I don't know what they're doing at the end of quarters with their sales teams, but like this feels loose. Like this feels like it's not, a disciplined business, if you will.
Man, talk about information that VCs would love to purchase, right?
Yeah, totally. But that's why we're bootstrapped. I mean, that's not the only reason, but we like the idea of, staying independent essentially in the market, because some of the products that I think we're going to come out with, our independence is going to be a strong selling point essentially.
NPS going down. I want to zoom in on that one last time. First, how did you get that information? Because I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I mean, because we have a lot of these users and we have a lot of connections in the industry. That was actually that was more through survey. So that was probably one of our only data points that we couldn't necessarily verify. And that's part of my problem with a lot of these other, like churn analyses. It's like everyone kind of lies about their churn. Everyone lies about their growth. Like they're not doing it aggressively, but they're like, yeah, we're this big, or yeah, this problem's solved. So the NPS numbers, like we weren't able to like verify that because we don't have like an NPS product. But yeah, we essentially asked founders, what NPS looked like at different periods in their business.
Wow. Because that is, I mean, a 10 doesn't sound good to me or anyone.
Keep in mind it's an average, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, anyone in customer success probably knows, like with NPS, negative 100 to 100, and so zero is, it's not quite neutral, but it's kind of close to neutral. And if you're at 50, it's really really good. And so I think that another way to look at it is 10 years ago, you were kind of forgiven for not great product. So, all of a sudden, if I was doing everything in spreadsheets and then you give me a database, you're like a Greek god. I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much. Right. But now it's like, yeah, whatever. Data's in the cloud. Like it's just expected, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, we got to keep raising the bar. I've enjoyed this so much. We've covered a bunch of different areas here, and we've gotten as much to the actual data as possible. I know it's impossible to get it 100%, but just like the fact that you have a quarter of SaaS company pricing data, wow. So I know our audience is going to love this. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, man. If there's anything else you need, just let me know. More than happy to help.
Awesome, man. Another great episode of Successfully Live.